In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer, I am bold to bring you this word today. Amen. Now you may be forgiven for feeling a little anxiety, worrying about yet another filibuster on the 3rd chapter of John, because that is how I'm built. Yes, we're in God so loved the world territory again. And it is possible, I've considered that it might be possible, that I have worn out your patience with my thoughts on the use and abuse of John 3:16 in particular. But since this is the Lenten Sunday traditionally marked for relief, a day of rose in the midst of purple, I'm persuaded to forge gently ahead with a slightly different approach. This is the lectionary year that is in every other season devoted to Mark's gospel, and yet at Lent and through Easter we get sidetracked. We get drawn into John, mostly because John takes us very deliberately toward the passion and the promise of Holy Week in a way that makes life easy for us, in a way that we're comfortable with. And it makes life easy for those who put the lectionary together too, let's be honest. I mean, who wants to dash haphazardly through the countryside as Mark tells the story? Who wants to do that when we can ponder the poetic majesty of Jesus according to John? This walk slowly towards the grand things of the Passion is what Lent and Easter is all about. This is Lent and Easter as we best imagine it. So it's John today. And in chapter 3, of course, we've already met Nicodemus, who's asking his questions and opening his heart to Jesus under the cover of darkness. Let's not forget that. This is part of the context that goes missing sometimes. Nicodemus comes at night. He is secretly learning and yearning and wondering and ultimately accepting that God is indeed working mightily in a brand new way in Jesus. And once Nicodemus asks his questions, he kind of disappears from the scene. There's nothing but Jesus, really. Jesus talk of lifting up and saving and so on. It tries to bring something to these nighttime conversations. It brings light to these nighttime conversations. God's light. God so loved the world has become that iconic scrap of Christian thought, more common in public imaginations than any other verse in the New Testament, certainly. But Jesus doesn't stop there. Jesus talks of the contrast between light and darkness, and it's that contrast, it's that image that becomes the heart of the Christian struggle, whatever else people think about John 3:16. In fact, the idea of the struggle between darkness and light may well be the idea on which the whole Christian enterprise turns. And as a metaphor, it seems perfect. We talk in our ordinary lives of shady characters, or of those whose smile lights up a room. We understand the differences. And because we're human, we crave clear definitions. That binary thinking that we imagine makes life easier. Darkness, light. It's as clear as night and day. It's different, rather, as night and day. Jeff has trouble with his simple metaphors. Jesus' metaphors are much more complex than that. Because darkness and light coexist. And each has its own attractive power. The light is in the world, Jesus says, and yet the darkness persists. Because darkness is attractive. Because darkness suits our purposes. More often than not, darkness mirrors our moods. Light offers a chance for redemption. Darkness is where we come from when we find that redemption. This is a cycle that we understand. This is a cycle that offers permission to fail with the promise of a new start. But when light and darkness compete for our attention and our affection, a very strange thing happens. Now, how many of you are habitual early risers? Early risers. You're up early, you like the morning. What did you notice that was different this morning? It was dark. Right? It was dark. But if you've been up in the morning and you've watched the sun come up, what happens? It's a transformative thing. Dawn is a lovely and wonderful and complex thing. It's not a binary decision, is it? It grows into brightness. The same thing happens at sundown. Dusk and dawn are moments of both and. They play tricks on our eyes, and they mingle hope and fear together. And anyone who loves the morning, or who can't wait to turn their eyes toward the stars in the evening, knows that the boundary between darkness and light is not fixed. The change is gradual. If you're sitting out in a field in July waiting to use your telescope, the change is pathetically slow. Certainly in Medicine Hat, out on the bald prairie, when darkness never seems to come, right? But it's not a clear line like the old Tom and Jerry cartoons, right? The change is gradual. The reality of light in the morning or darkness in the evening kind of sneaks up on you. The arrival of complete darkness, especially in southern Alberta, is a slow, seductive process. And Jesus' words here suggest that there's always a choice between the two, that there's always some commingling. There's always a decision to make. The light has come into the world, he says. And people loved darkness rather than light. Jesus is acknowledging this both and moment. Not that he's encouraging us to flirt with the darkness, but because there's always a chance to encounter good and godly deeds, even in the dark. Now, from an early age, I was afraid of the dark. I was prone, as a child, to spectacular, to lurid nightmares. I was small enough to be a natural target for nocturnal bullies in my hometown. I hated walking home from things at night. Everything about the darkness seemed sinister to me. until the night that everything changed. I was walking home from a hockey game. And between the arena and our home were the fairgrounds, a great oval that used to be a harness racing track. It was still on the edge of town, so there was plenty of darkness. It was winter, there was snow, and when you walk in the dark in the snow, you hear strange noises, and echoes. Everything is amplified. It wasn't far. It was less than 3/4 of a mile. But something about that walk home, about halfway across the open fairground, made me stop. And I looked around, because of course I was being followed. There were wild animals, I don't know. And I looked around and I saw nothing. And then something made me look up. And when I looked up, I saw everything. Everything. Light. Light in the midst of darkness. Not street lights. We didn't have street lights in the fairground. What I saw was the beginning of Carl Sagan's billions and billions of stars, raging against the darkness. The 1,000 points of light 20 years before Reagan, offering hope to a frightened teenager. I knew nothing of Jesus' metaphor in that moment. I only knew that I didn't need to be afraid of the dark anymore. In a world of multiple choices, in a time of encroaching darkness, even now as we live out this new and agonizing metaphor of good and bad, evil and righteous, darkness and light, it's my prayer that you would be strengthened and comforted by the glimmers of light that only reveal themselves when it is darkest. In a time of conflict and confusion as we are currently in, may we remember that the light stands before us, among us, always ready to show us the way. As we share in the sacrament of grace at the Lord's table today, perhaps we will actually be enlightened in the sharing of this sacred meal. None of this will eliminate the darkness. People still love the darkness. People will always love the darkness, especially those whose deeds are evil. No, the darkness remains. But the light always shines. And the darkness cannot overcome it. Amen.